One of the easiest questions that you can do from this topic is given to you. The side of a cube is given and the volume and surface area of the cube are asked from you. So for a cube, you know that volume is equal to a cube. Okay, now taking into consideration the actual value, this is nothing but 8 centimeter cube. Okay, now you know that delta V by V is equal to 3 delta A by A. A is the side length. Why is this so? Because V is equal to A cube. So using the properties that we just read, delta V by V is 3 times delta A by A. That implies delta V is equal to 3V times delta A by A. Everything is given to you. That implies delta V is equal to, if I just substitute, 3, 8, 0.01 divided by 2 is equal to 0.12 centimeter cube. Okay, if now, so how do I report this? I can report this as V is equal to 8.00 plus minus 0.12 centimeter cube. Now I have to calculate surface area. I know that surface area of a cube is given as 6 times a square. Okay, so when you go on to calculate delta A, first of all, let me just calculate the surface area for you, the actual value. So you just substitute the value of A is the side, which is 2. So I get 6 into 2 square is equal to 6 into 4, which is 24 centimeter. Now I have to calculate delta A by A, right? So delta A by A is equal to 2 times delta small a by A. Now this is where you should remember, irrespective of what constant is coming in the relation, you are only concerned about the quantities in which the error is happening. It's not like I will multiply 6 as well here. Okay, some students make this silly mistake when they go for doing this. So delta A by A is equal to 2 times delta small a by A. That implies delta A is equal to A times 2 into delta small a by A. Okay, if you just substitute the values, you will see that this turns out to be 0.24. Okay, therefore I can write my A as 24.0 plus minus 0.24 centimeter square. So what you should keep in mind from this question is this thing. Even though A and 6a square were related like this, I only put a 2 here and not a 12. So errors don't propagate the way that some people think they do. Here is another question. An object covers 16.0 plus minus 0.4 meter distance in 4.0 plus minus 2, 0.2 seconds. You're supposed to find out the speed. Now, speed is equal to distance by time. Okay. Now, if you just substitute the values, what do you get? 16 divided by 4 is equal to 4 meter per second. Alright, this is the speed. Now I need to find the error in speed. So I know that delta V by V is equal to plus minus delta S by S plus delta T by T. Okay, even though time was in the denominator, when you propagate errors, they just add up. Okay, so if I take V to the right side, if I just transpose it, you can write V here. So my delta V will turn out to be It's a very simple question, and I think if it comes in the paper, you can easily fetch marks into 4.0, which is equal to 0.3. So this question was done very easily. Another previous year question is in front of you. The length of the cylinder is measured with a meter rod having the least count 0.1 centimeter. Its diameter is measured with vernier calipers having least count 0.01 centimeters. Given the length is 5 and diameter is 2, I need to find the percentage error in the calculated value of the volume. Now, what are we supposed to calculate? We are supposed to calculate volume first. So volume is what? Volume is pi r square h. Okay, I can even write it in terms of diameter as pi d square h by 4. Now, to calculate delta V by V, relative error, I have 2 times delta d by d plus delta h by h. Okay, that implies delta V by V into 100, which gives me the percentage error, is equal to 2 times. I just substitute the values. Now, my delta D is nothing but the least count of the vernier caliper. Okay, so it's 0.01 divided by 2 plus, and my height is measured with the least count of 0.1 centimeter. So my 0.1 is my delta H. Okay, into 100. I just multiply this by 100. So what you get is 3%. So what to take back from this question is, sometimes they will just give you the least count of instruments. Here least count is given, least count is given. So the least count will basically mean the absolute error that you can get while calculating that quantity. So like delta H is the absolute error in calculating H, delta D is the absolute error in calculating D. So sometimes they will give you the errors in terms of least counts, but you should know that you have to do simply the same thing. Let's revisit least count. So the least count of an instrument is the smallest value of a physical quantity which can be measured accurately by the instrument. Okay, the least count will translate into absolute error in some situations like we saw in the problems before. So the true instruments that are frequently asked in the papers are vernier calipers and screw gauge. So I'll just quickly go through what a vernier caliper is. A vernier caliper looks like this. It has a main scale and it has a vernier scale. What you want is at when nothing is there between the vernier calipers, the zeros of the main scale should coincide with the zeros of the vernier scale division, and then if this is not the case, then the system has a zero error of its own. Okay, so what this means is when you start the experiment, your vernier caliper has already taken some value. For example, if my zero error is 0.3 millimeter, that means at the time when nothing is there between, you're not measuring anything, your main scale division, which is this, and your vernier scale division, which is something like this. Okay, I'll zoom into the vernier in order for you to understand more clearly. You can see here that the zero of the main scale is not coinciding with the zero of the vernier scale. You can see here that the first, second, third, the third vernier scale division is coinciding with one of the main scale divisions. So what this would translate into is when you start the measurement, you already have measured 0.3 millimeter. So if I measure the quantity and my answer turns out to be 5.8 millimeter, then the actual thing is only 5.5, because we had a head start. It's like having a head start. So what you do is, first of all, in any equipment, you need to find the least count of the equipment. Okay, and then you need to find the zero error if it's there. If a zero error is there, then your actual reading is the measured reading or the observed reading minus the zero error. There is one more term which is called known as the zero correction. Zero correction is nothing but the negative of zero error. Okay, let's move on to the screw gauge. We will look at the problem so that this becomes more clear. For the screw gauge, the least count is given by the pitch divided by the total number of divisions on the circular scale. Okay, so there is a linear scale. There is a linear scale which is given here, this one, and then there is a circular scale, circular head. So pitch is the distance moved by the screw on the linear scale by the number of full rotations given. Okay, so basically what this means is, in one full rotation of the circular head, how much distance does this entire section move in or out on the linear scale. Okay, I think you guys might remember this from the lab experiments. So this is all you need to know about screw gauge to solve the problems. Two concepts that you should memorize are, one is precision. What is precision? Precision is smaller when the least count is high. So if the least count of your instrument goes on decreasing, your precision goes on increasing. And what is accuracy? Accuracy is the closeness of the measured value to the actual value. Okay, so precision means how precise or how close by your actual answer is to the other answers, and accuracy means your answer is in a close distance to the actual value. In precision, they don't really mention the actual value anywhere. Okay, precision is all about the least count of the instrument. Let's look at some basic problems to jog up your memory. The first problem is given like this. The length of the string of a simple pendulum is measured with a meter scale to be 63.5 centimeter. The radius of the bob plus the hook is measured with the help of a vernier caliper, and that turns out to be 1.55 centimeter. You are supposed to select the incorrect statement. There are four statements given. There's statements about least count, and then the statements about effective length. You can see from measurements that the least count of the meter scale is 0.1 centimeter, because yeah, you can just look at the measurement and see that the meter scale has measured till the first decimal point, so its least count is 0.1, and the vernier caliper has measured till 2 decimal points, so it has a least count of 0.01. Alright, effective length of simple pendulum is what? It is 63.5 plus 1.55 is equal to 65.15. Okay, but when you round this off, what do you get? Remember the rules I told you about significant figures? The least number of decimal places are 1. So this should have least number of decimal places. So this should be 65.2 centimeter. Now let's look at a question from circular gauge. Sometimes you'll be getting lengthier questions that look lengthy, but I think if we attempt this question right now, you'll see that it's a very simple question and it can easily fetch you marks. So 2 full turns of a circular scale of a gauge cover a distance of 1 millimeter on a scale. So let's do it step by step, and then we'll keep on reading the question as we go along. So what is the first information given to you? It's given that two full turns cover a distance of 1 millimeter. This means here that your pitch is 0.5 millimeter or half of 1 millimeter, because it takes 2 turns. Next, what is given? The total number of divisions on the circular scale is 50. Now you know the pitch and you know the number of divisions on the circular scale, so you can easily find the least count, which is nothing but 0.5 divided by 50 equal to 0.01 millimeter. Okay. Now next, what is given? While measuring the diameter of a thin wire, a student notes that the main scale reading of 3 millimeter. Let's write this down. I have a main scale reading of 3 millimeter. The number of circular scale divisions in line with the main scale is 35. What this means is your circular scale division is equal to 35. When you're reading it, it is similar to a vernier calipers, in which whatever circular scale division coincides with the main scale reading, that much is the reading from the circular scale. Okay. Now measuring. Okay, and there is also one thing given. There is a zero error of minus 0.03 millimeter. What do you mean by minus 0.03 millimeter? It means that the zero of the main, for example, this was the zero of the main scale, the linear scale. If this was the zero of the linear scale, the circular scale zero was to the left of it, or basically it was behind it. So what it means was, when you start measuring something, you are lagging behind. So whatever you measure, let me call it your apparent measurement. It's not the actual value. Apparent measurement or apparent value of diameter. Now we are supposed to find the apparent value of the diameter. Okay, what is it? It's reported as 3 millimeter on the main scale plus 35 divisions on the circular scale. So how do you write these things down? You take the whole magnitude of the main scale reading, and then for the circular scale reading you multiply whatever reading you get into the least count. This is same for the vernier calipers as well. For the vernier scale, you will be multiplying with the least count. Main scale will be as it is. Okay, so this will be what? This will be 3 plus 35 into 0.01 is nothing but 3.35. Okay, now this was the apparent value. You will get the actual value. Actual value is always apparent, or whatever you measured, minus the zero error. Note the term that I'm using is zero error, not zero correction. Zero correction is the negative of zero error. It's generally not even asked in the paper. So your actual is apparent minus zero error. Now your zero error is given in the question as minus 0.03. So you just take that and you will get the answer as 3.38 millimeter. Okay. So what you should notice, first of all, this is valid for screw gauge, this is valid for vernier caliper, this is valid for every instrument that is there. Your actual, whatever your actual reading for any experiment, actual answer is your main scale reading plus least count into either your circular scale reading for screw gauge, or if it's a vernier caliper, then you will have a vernier scale reading, and then from this you subtract the zero error. Zero error is positive if the screw gauge or the vernier calipers zero is ahead of the main scale, and it is negative if it's behind it. In the last part of our lecture, let's quickly review the important experimental setups that might appear in the paper. The first one is to find G using a simple point pendulum. You're given the time periods as 2 pi root L by G, and from this you see that G is equal to 4 pi square L by T square. How do you do this in the lab? The procedure is very simple. You try to determine the time for n complete swings for m different lengths of strings. So for each you choose a length, and then for that length you complete n swings. Now for each length you calculate the time for one swing. Okay, so the time for one swing is basically your time period. What you should remember from this experiment is t is proportional to the root of L, or t square is proportional to L, and the relation between t and acceleration due to gravity. Okay, these experiments are never, they will never ask you how the experiment was done. They will generally give you the readings of an experiment, and then they will ask you questions that are related to either error or dimensions or something of that sort. So let's look at this question. A student performs an experiment for the determination of g, and he commits an error of delta L. Okay, so we are supposed to find g, which is given by this formula. L is given to you, and error of delta L is given to you. Okay, for t he takes the time of n oscillation. Sometimes in the JEE paper or NEET paper or any paper that you are appearing for, what will happen is it will be there will be some grammatical error, so it will be hard for you to understand what the paper is trying to say, but the most logical thing that you can make out of it is what you should go forward with. So it says for t he takes the time of n oscillation. This means that he measured it n times. There were n oscillations in total, and it took a time of t. Okay, and the least count of that measurement was delta t. Okay, so for n oscillations it took a time t, and this was done using a least count of delta t, and he commits a human error of 0.1 seconds. So which of the following data the measurement of g will be most accurate? Okay, so a normal person, a normal student will try to apply all the values to the formula and then see which one is giving you the most accurate value, but there is a loop around it, and we will see it here. So let's first write what delta g by g will look like. Delta g by g from the formula will look like delta L by L plus 2 times delta t divided by, now note here that here you will have a value n in the denominator. Why? Because there are n oscillations being performed in total. Okay, there are n oscillations being performed. So what we have here is your delta g depends on the value of n, depends on the value of t and L. Now L is fixed. Alright, so what can vary? Your n can vary and your t can vary. Now delta g will be accurate. Delta g will be accurate when the value of delta g is very less. So when will the value of delta g be less? When first of all the value of n should be high. Now in which of the cases is the value of n high? In B and D the value of n is high. Okay. Next, in these two, what should be the value of t? The delta t's are given. The delta t's are given as 0.1 and 0.5. So you see the delta g depends on delta t, such that if delta t increases, delta g also increases. So from this one we see that this option, because of the lower value of delta t, this option seems to be the most accurate. Okay, so if you actually apply all the values to this formula, you will find the delta g turns out to be the minimum. But even before doing that, you are able to find it out just on the basis of the way delta g will change based on the other quantities. Next experiment that we look at is the verification of Ohm's law using a voltmeter and an ammeter. Ohm's law is given here, V is proportional to I. What you do is you create the circuit, you apply an ammeter. In series, you apply a voltmeter across the resistance, and then you have a variable resistance RH. You keep on changing the variable resistance RH, and you try to plot V versus I curve, and you and you want a straight line from that. Okay, this is a very simple experiment. Again, the questions that will come from this are again based on errors. So let's just look at one of the questions. In the circuit shown to you, a voltmeter is ideal and its least count is 0.1 V. So least count of voltmeter is 0.1. So I have my delta V is equal to 0.1. The least count of ammeter is 1 milliampere. So least count of ammeter is 1 milliampere. Let reading of the voltmeter be 30 volts and the ammeter be V is equal to 30 and ammeter's reading is 0.020 ampere. Now you need to calculate the value of error within the error limits. So first of all, the value of resistance within the error limits. First what you do is resistance is V by I. It's nothing but 1.5 kilo ohms. This is your first step. Now you need to find delta R. So using the previous simple formula, delta R by R is equal to delta V by V plus delta I by I. Okay, that implies delta R is equal to I transpose R to the right side, R delta V by V plus delta I by I. Now you just need to substitute the values from the top. So you get 1.5 kilo ohm into 0.1 by 30 plus 0.02 divided by 1. Okay. So what is the answer for this? If I calculate it, I find that it is 0.080 kilo ohm. Okay. So this is your answer for delta R. The next experiment is that of finding Young's modulus by Searle's methods. So what you have in this experiment, basically the arrangement consists of two wires, as you can see. One is the compensating wire, one is the experimental wire. One of the wires is a reference wire, whereas the other one has the load fixed on it. The reference wire is used to compensate for the thermal expansion of the wire, and the extension in the test wire, the experimental wire is the test wire. The extension in this wire is measured with the help of a spherometer which is attached here. Okay, and a spirit level arrangement. So if you've done this in the lab, then very good, you might remember this. Even if you have not done, what you should remember is Young's modulus is given by this equation. Y is equal to F force into length by area into the extension, and area is the A is the area of cross section. So the procedure that they use in this is, first of all, they use a micrometer to determine the radius of the wire. Then they measure the length of the wire, and they note down the load applied. Load is basically your weight applied and corresponding increase in length x, and then they easily find the y by using this formula. The questions on this will again be in the form of errors or dimension questions. But look here, you need to, for example, this question. A student performs an experiment to determine the Young's modulus of a wire which is exactly 2 meters long by Searle's method. Okay, so what are you given to? You are given the length of the wire by this method. In a particular reading, the student measured the extension and the length to be 0.8 millimeter. So the extension, which was x, is also given to you. Okay, and length is also given to you with an uncertainty of 0.05 millimeter. So the uncertainty in measuring length is also given to you as 0.05 millimeter. So that will be delta x at the load of exactly 1 kg, which is the force. The student also measures the diameter of the wire to be 0.4 millimeter with an uncertainty of 0.01. Then you need to find the Young's modulus. These are all repeating questions from previous year's papers. So it's not at all hard to do these things. All you need to remember is y is equal to FL divided by your area into x. For this case, this becomes 4FL divided by pi d squared, where d is the diameter, into delta L. Okay, if I substitute the values, I get 2 into 10 to the power 11 Newton per meter square. Now I need to find the relative error, so I'll just write what del y by y is the Young's modulus, is equal to delta d by d plus delta L by L. It is nothing but 2 into 0.01 by 0. Sorry, this is 0.4 plus 1 into 0.05 divided by 0.8. If you just solve this, we get the delta y by y is equal to 0.1125, or delta y is equal to 2 into 10 to the, it's not clear to you, I'll write it again, 2 into 10 to the power 11 into 0.1125, which is similar to 0.2 into 10 to the power 11. So my y turns out to be if I write it in the error form, y plus minus delta y is equal to plus minus 0.2 into 10 to the power 11 Newton per meter square. Okay. Believe me when I say this came in the actual IIT paper, not even mains or IIEEE. This is a question from IIT JEE, which used to happen before. But when you look at it, it's a very simple question. This question can repeat in state board exams, in NEET, in IIEEE, in JEE, in every exam that is there. So the basic principle is the same. Now that we've looked at the kind of questions that generally come from these topics, we can easily go through the rest of the experiments without doing many questions right here, because all the questions will be error related or dimension related. So the fourth one is the specific heat using a calorimeter. Specific heat is given by this formula right here, which is S is equal to Q by M delta theta. Q is the heat change, M is the mass of the object, and delta theta is the change in temperature. Okay, the instrument is drawn in front of you. In the instrument you can see there is a calorimeter, there is a thermometer kept here, there is an ammeter, voltmeter, thermometer, and there is a cell that is providing the EMF to it. Okay, the procedure for this is extremely simple, as I've mentioned it here. You first of all you weigh an empty container with the churner, then you weigh the calorimeter with liquid in it, so the difference will give you the mass of the liquid. Okay, basically in this experiment we are trying to find the specific heat of the liquid that is there. Now with the switch open, we read the initial reading of the thermometer. Now we close the switch and stir it continuously, okay, for a time t, and then we take the readings of the thermometer, ammeter and voltmeter again, and we find the calculate heat supplied and the rise in temperature. So to do that, the equation in this system is nothing fancy. It's given right here. It is the mass of calorimeter into specific heat of calorimeter into delta theta plus mass of liquid. This is for liquid. This is for calorimeter. You just add these two. This is the formula. So in order to get the specific heat, you just transpose it and you can easily find it out. The questions from this will again be of the similar sort. They might just ask you to find the change or the absolute error or the relative error in a specific heat. To do that, what will you do? You will have to find delta S by S. Okay, and the formula that will be there is this. It depends on mass of liquid, it depends on voltage, it depends on delta theta depends on SC. Okay, so the questions will be of the same sort. Let's look at the next experiment. This you might have done in your labs as well. So in these experiments, you need to find the focal length either of a convex lens or a concave mirror using UV method. So what was the general procedure for doing this? You fixed a lens on the lens stud here, right here. Okay, then you placed a pin in front of the lens. Then you measured the distance between the two. The value of this distance was the value of u, or the object distance, and this was negative because you've kept it on the left side. Next, you place the image pin on the other side of the lens. This is the image pin, this is the object pin. You kept the image pin on the other side of the lens, and then you made sure there was no parallax between the image pin and the image on this lens. The value of v will be the distance between the lens and the image pin. And for lenses, we have the formula 1 by v minus 1 by u is equal to 1 by f. If I try to plot the shape of the graphs, if I plot v versus u and 1 by v versus 1 by u, you can easily see the different plots that come in. For the concave mirror also, the procedure is similar. One more thing that you should note for the case here is that for given a VU diagram, you can find the focal length from it by making a 45-degree angle to the curve. That is what the focal length will be. Let's look at the concave mirror case. Concave mirror is also similar to the convex mirror. The procedure is the same. You place the object pin here, and then you place the image pin, and then you remove the parallax between them. You take the values as u and v, and your f is found out by 1 by v plus 1 by u is equal to 1 by f. And in order to find the focal length graphically, you just plot the different values of v and u that you get, and this value, the intersection where the 45-degree angle meets, is your f. Okay, the questions of these will also be similar, so there is no point in doing it here. Let's look at one of the other experiments, which is speed of sound in a resonating column. So I will try to explain this a little more because this will again repeat in the chapter on sounds. So what happens is, it's a very simple apparatus in which is used to measure the speed of sound in air with the help of a tuning fork or a known frequency. If you have a system that can produce a known frequency, then that will do the same thing. The resonance column is an air column closed at one end, and the length is variable. You generally fill it with a fluid or water to change the length. So it is based on the phenomena of standing waves. A vibrating tuning fork is held right here, and it's held near the open end of the tube. Okay, so when it starts to vibrate, this entire column, the column vibrates with the frequency of the tuning fork. As the length of the air column is increased from 0, length of the air column, let me fill the water till here and start decreasing the length of the water. As the water goes down, the length of the air column will start to increase. Okay, as we try to increase that, a stage is reached where you will observe an intense sound from the column. Okay, this is where the resonance will happen. The vibrations of the air column will be so high that you will be able to clearly listen to a sound. So it's all based on the phenomena of resonance. The procedure is also very simple. You need to find the first resonating length and the second resonating length. Okay, there is an end correction E. Okay, because of your apparatus that you're using. So your first length, because it's a closed column, is L1 plus E is lambda by 4, where lambda is the wavelength of the sound wave. Similarly, your second L2 is 3 lambda by 4, and what you need to find is L2 minus L1, which will give you the value of lambda. From the value of lambda, you can easily find the value of the speed. So in the questions that will be given to you, they will tell you that the first resonating length was L1, or the value will be given to you. Similarly, they will give you the value of L2, and then you need to find the value of velocity, and there will be errors of this sort. They'll say that you found L1 with some error delta N1, you found L2 with some error delta L2. Okay, so you can see that if I want to determine V is equal to frequency into lambda. Frequency is fixed, so lambda varies, right? Now lambda is equal to 2 times L2 minus L1. It's equal to 2 times F L2 minus L1. This is velocity. Okay, so if I have to find velocity, so you can easily see that my errors will propagate in the error to the velocity. So if I want to calculate velocity, it will include terms of delta L1 and delta L2. So the final experiment that we are going to study is the determination of resistivity. This works on the base principle of Wheatstone bridge. It says that when the bridge is balanced, the resistances are in this ratio. At this point, the galvanometer does not read any value. It gives a value of 0, and the ratio of P to Q is similar to the ratio of R to S. Now we need to find the resistivity. You know that resistance is equal to rho into L by A. Okay. So what is the arrangement of this bridge? Let me zoom in and show you. So the arrangement is consisting of a 100 centimeter long wire connected between A and C, these 2 points, and it is tapped at the point B. It's being tapped at this point if you look clearly, and there is a jockey or a sliding contact which you can move, so the point B can move. Okay, these are the two lengths. AB is given as L and BC is 100 minus L. Okay, and R is the known resistance in the system, and we need to find whose resistance we need to find S in the system. Okay, so the procedure is very simple. First of all, you plug the key and you start sliding this jockey B. Okay, and you start sliding it on the wire to the point B where the galvanometer stops showing any reading. Okay, when it stops having any deflection, that means that the bridge has been balanced. What that means is, if I use the previous formula, P by Q is equal to R by S. Here my P is the resistivity of the wire, Q is the here my P is the resistivity of the wire into L by A. Q is equal to resistivity of the wire into 100 minus L by A. Alright, so when I divide this, I get my S is equal to R times 100 minus L divided by L. Alright, this is a fairly simple thing to do, and the questions on this are also error based. So they might tell you that the error in calculating L is delta L, or the error in calculating resistance is delta R, and you need to find how the error propagates to delta S. We have done enough problems in this course, and I'll be sending you more problems for practice. And so at least 20 problems must be done by you so that you cover every aspect of the chapter, because from this chapter at least one question will come in the paper. It has been coming for a long time and you should not miss out on those. So happy learning, and let's meet in the next class.